Good afternoon. Happy Easter, everybody. I'm Kevin McPherson. This is HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We're just popping in. I didn't do a segment Saturday. That broke a streak of consecutive days. I didn't count how many, but I'd been on every day, sometimes twice a day. And so I hope everybody's having a great Easter. I hope, the Easter Bunny filled your basket with everything your little heart desired. No, I am not wearing traditional Easter colors today. No vibrant colors, no array of, it's all earth tones here, isn't it? I would apologize, but this was the next shirt in my rotation. I'm not trying to be an Easter contrarian or a trendsetter or go against the grain. It's just what's up. What's up, Kevin? Happy Easter, Kevin. Thank you for the comments. Already flowing in. Look, today, there's not any intel today. There's nothing to share there. I've really been thinking about what Arkansas could finish with and what I think the Razorbacks probably should consider finishing with. Because we were talking in the last few days after the big splash retention announcement, the announcement that Carter Knox to the NBA draft pool will keep his eligibility open in case he decides to come back, which I lean toward, significantly right now that he'll be back. Like we say, all it takes is one NBA team to bet on you, and then you stay in the draft. But having said that, given everything, the high school class, again, the retention, and let's count Knox for now among the retention, even though not technically, there were three big names emerging with the idea that Arkansas is really trying to zero in on an A-list kind of guy, splash kind of bring out of the portal. And these were one name, Jameer Watkins, has been out there for a while. And then just very recently on Thursday, the same day of the retention and Carter Knox announcements, guys went in the portal like PJ Haggerty and Chad Baker-Mazara. So you have kind of a triangle there of guys that I've heard Arkansas has real interest in, and it's not just Arkansas, it's mutual, and there may be some smoke to move forward on any of those three. But the more I drilled down on this, now look, when we came on Friday, is the last time we came on, it was about the same time, 3:10, 3:15, something like that. Within 5 minutes we were on. Jeff Goodman put out a tweet, and I didn't see it until after the fact. He puts out a tweet that PJ Haggerty, the 6'3" guard out of Memphis, just a volume score, ball runs through him, alpha, guy in the backcourt, a two most of his career. And we talked about when we mentioned him that he played some one. There were some injury problems in Memphis's backcourt in the postseason, and he actually spent some time on the one. Well, Jeff Goodman's tweet sounded like source information, and he's talking about the asking price is $4 million with the lead primary ball handler role. So when I saw that, I thought, couple of things there. That's not flying either way with Arkansas. Well, after we did the show, in one of the post-show comments later that night, Friday night, one of the viewers posted in the comment section with the YouTube kind of the details about the $4 million, and I jumped there and said, "Yeah, I heard that, but also the lead primary role ain't either of those things happening in Arkansas." And here I am on Sunday now, a day and a half later, and I mean that's just the way it is. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on PJ Haggerty. It's not that you couldn't negotiate and get to some agreement on a lower NIL price tag, but with what Arkansas is bringing in and bringing back between Darius Acup Jr. and DJ Wagner, I just don't see room for an alpha 2 also wanting to be the lead at the one. It's just that just won't work. No matter how good the player is, what you're trying to do has to make sense. So I can't eliminate him from the process. Maybe there's some negotiating room, not only on the price tag, but what his role would really be. And even then, I think there are better options for this Arkansas roster than PJ Haggerty. Jameer Watkins is one that would be a good option at the wing. As a 3-4 kind of guy, can give you some versatility there, gives you some double down if Carter Knox stays in the draft. But I think there's a better option out of those three, the best option out of those three, and it's Chad Baker-Mazara. So I've got two names at the top of my thought process today on how you finish this roster. Assuming you only go two more, I guess there's a way to go three more, with two of those being back in depth. But I'm going to look at it from one more splash, A-list kind of guy, plus one more back in depth piece. So hear me out. That's kind of my theme. Hear me out. Chad Baker-Mazara. Arkansas, one of the biggest needs is three-point shooting. It just is. We've said it so many times. Between the Final Four teams, the Elite Eight teams, all of those teams shot, there's kind of like an invisible line of where you need to be. 35% or better from three. There was a couple of Elite Eight exceptions. I don't think there was one exception in the Final Four. The number of makes fit per game fits into that. How many you take per game? So the efficiency and some level of volume in Arkansas wasn't quite there, despite being a player away or two from being an Elite Eight team. So even though that's true, that you didn't have to be, even that good from three as a team, it'd be nice to get there because the numbers over the years show that that's important. Well, Chad Baker-Mazara checks that box better than Haggerty or Watkins when you look at him on his career. A 40% over 4 seasons, 144 makes, a 40% three-point shooter. So right there's a reason to favor him as one of these A-list guys, maybe the top A-list guy you would try to add. Not only has he made 144 over his career, but this last season at Auburn, he made 59 three-pointers at over 38%. So his volume went way up. It was the first year in his career that he really was a starter. When you looked at his 2 years at Auburn, he started fewer than 10 games 2 years ago. Last year, 34, 38 games. But only playing 25 minutes per game. That's the other thing. These other guys, Haggerty and Jameer Watkins, they require a lot of minutes for the kind of roles they have. Would they be okay with stepping down in minutes, maybe if the NIL is good enough and maybe trying to have a better postseason than they've had? But with the Chad Baker-Mazara, you don't have to worry about how he would even factor into your postseason success because there's a proof of concept there. Not only does he have 2 years of SEC experience and 4 years in college, but he's got NCAA tournament experience in back-to-back seasons. He helped Auburn get to a Final Four this year and win the regular season SEC championship. So you've got so many things that check boxes with Chad Baker-Mazara that Calipari covets in those kind of guys out of the portal, because we saw it in the first season. Nelly Davis with his Final Four experience, Jonas Adu on the front line with Elite Eight experience, an all-league kind of guy that also helped, by the way, Tennessee win a regular season title. So there are so many ways that you look at Chad Baker-Mazara that he's checking boxes that these other two, A-list kind of guys don't, but requiring less in terms of the guys you're retaining and guys you're bringing in from the high school ranks. And even on your front line, the ball doesn't have to run through him all the time. He's not going to require 30 minutes to be that dude. Remember, that was one of the issues with Keyshawn Hall. Back when Arkansas was in the mix with him, they couldn't promise him all that. Part of that was ironing out their retention still at that point, but the vision for it. So that's not to say that Jameer Watkins isn't a great option there. I think better than Haggerty given all the circumstances, but I think Chad Baker-Mazara is an even better option because of how that fits. So let's go through that. We talked SEC experience. We talked the league title, Final Four run, the three-point shooting. All of that makes sense for what Arkansas's needs are. But I don't think he scares off other guys that are looking at primary roles because he's, again, 25 minutes last year was kind of his ceiling in terms of playing time. You can make that work with the studs you're retaining, including a Carter Knox. So what does that look like? Well, think about it this way. Nate Ament was a guy that Arkansas's been in the mix for and waiting on. A big-time shooter, a thin wing, a little taller than this guy. But if they were okay with that, this also makes sense. You look at what you lost in Nelly Davis. You lost a guy that you brought in that was an efficient three-point shooter. You were hoping that would carry over when he came to Arkansas with a bunch of experience, including a Final Four. Chad Baker-Mazara checks all those, except he's 6'7", not 6'4". No, he didn't average the same amount of points that Nelly did coming out of Florida Atlantic, but Nelly was also coming out of a high-level mid-major program where Chad Baker-Mazara was playing with, on the high major level with a bunch of other quality backcourt players. So he wasn't, it's a little bit different there. And then if you look at his numbers at Auburn last year, they're comparable to what Nelly's were in year one in Arkansas, in his only year at Arkansas. But you would have that backcourt shooter and versatility to play him some at the two. I'm going to go through some of how this would work. So think about it. Let's say that you had a starting lineup of Darius Acuff Jr., DJ Wagner, and you had Chad Baker-Mazara, Carter Knox, and a big man in your starting lineup. That would work. You're bringing Malik Thomas in off the bench in that 2 spot, and Baker-Mazara in that scenario is at the 3. So you've got a way to keep him on the floor, Chad Baker-Mazara, when you bring Malik Thomas in. What does that do? It gives you potentially two wings that will help you improve as a three-point shooting team. Malik Thomas is not proof of concept yet, but he was shooting 8.4 threes per game at Overtime Elite, making 38%. So automatically, just having those two on the court as your wings, whether it's A-Cup or DJ, playing some minutes at the one, you potentially are spacing the floor a lot better than you did last year. Imagine Knox on the court with those guys as a small ball four. We're going to get into why that makes a little bit sense. No, he's not a Duthero, but there's some qualities there that it's not a stretch to think he won't help there. So Chad Baker-Mazara, that lineup versatility, because even if he's at the three, you could put Malik on the floor with him, or you could have him on the floor and bring Malik off the bench in place of him. So to me, he's a 2-3. He can help you at the 2 and the 3. You could say, well, what's the difference? They're both wings. Well, Baker-Mazara can also create shots. He's not just a three-point shooter. You know, that's what you're getting in Malik Thomas, but you would have the best of both worlds. You're getting one unproven who's at some point's going to get there. You don't know how fast it'll be when he comes to college, and another guy that's been there, done that. So I don't think this squeezes you too much in your backcourt wing where you're really kind of loaded. So another argument's to be, well, doesn't that really tell you that instead of a guy like that, you need maybe some more frontline help? I don't think so, not necessarily, because look at it this way. If you say, well, that doesn't help you at the forward, it really kind of does, because you could have him on the court with a Carter Knox at that small ball four. Just jumping to Carter, we talked so much about how he finished the season, right? The last 18 games versus the first 18. The last 18 games, he averaged over 10 points per game, 10.5 points per game. His three-point percentage went way up. His volume of makes and his percentage. He was 43.5% in those last 18 games from three, and he started shooting more. So, you're looking at those kind of things. He was 20 of 46 from three in those last 14. But what we haven't talked about, we just said it in general, Carter maintained his 80% free throw shooting from where he was the totality of the season. And that was the same percentage in those last 18 games where his role went up and his understanding of how to play went up. But what we haven't talked about, we talked about percentage. In the first 18 games, Carter Knox shot 25 free throws, only 25. In the last 18, he shot 66. Who does that sound like? It sounds like a Duthero kind of stuff. At 6'6", he's strong. He started to learn how to use his first step and get leverage on guys and then bully ball a little bit. Is he as explosive and as strong and big as a Duthero? No. But what Arkansas's added to the front line and the two bigs, plus some other stuff, like Trevor Brazile playing better against physicality, not necessarily a more physical guy. He didn't change. He didn't go overnight to become a physical guy, but he's handling physicality better. So there are ways to make this work that makes sense to me where guys are still getting their minutes. Now, Arkansas may or may not be heavily into Chad Baker-Mazara as it moves along. But given the three names and those early stages of just got in the portal, Watkins has been there a little longer. Watkins may very well be a priority. I'm not sure now about Haggerty. I guess there's something that could be worked out there. And then Chad Baker-Mazara, but to me it makes a lot of sense. Looking at other options, when we're talking about how you fill out this roster, and you say, well, Baker-Mazara doesn't help you on the front line, Arkansas could do that. I think the other name that still makes sense to me, and maybe the most sense, even though there were some big men that entered the portal on Friday, we didn't talk about them. I'll casually mention their names in a little bit, but the one that continues to make the most sense to me for frontline depth is Yagana Onenso. And hear me out. 7-footer. Since he played 2 years for Cal, spent the last season at Kansas State, they're now listing him at 247. He's added some weight to that 7-foot frame. But in the 40 games he played for Calipari at Kentucky, he blocked 82 shots, averaging about 11 minutes per game total in his 2 years there. 12 minutes, something like that when you average it out. But 82 blocks in 40 games. If you look at him at a per 40-minute standard in those 2 seasons under Calipari at Kentucky, it's nearly 6 blocks per 40 minutes. What does Arkansas have in its 2 big men it just added? A lot. More physicality, bigger bodies, more versatility offensively from Ewan, more physicality from Pringle. but you don't have rim protection there. Onyenso helps check that box. He's always been, I mean, the most minutes he ever played in the season was 18.6 at Kentucky. And I've been told to keep an eye on it. Well, I'm keeping an eye on it, and I start thinking about this combination of Baker-Mazara and Onyenso and how to finish this. It's the one I like the most. It's all I came here today to say, nearly 15 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Is these are the guys I'm really drilling out down on. What does Onyenso help with? He's that continuity guy. You say, well, he wasn't at Arkansas last year. No, but the previous 2 years, those were back-to-back NCAA tournament teams at Kentucky. The only win they had in those last 5 years of Cal was Onyenso's first year. He was on that team that actually won an NCAA tournament game. And then he was on the team the next year that was one game outside of first place in the SEC behind Tennessee. Yeah, they got upset in the first round of the tournament, but it was an NCAA tournament team and a very successful team. He's got all, you talk about retention, this would be another guy in a sense, that's would have a third year under Calipari. So even though he wasn't here again last year, it makes a lot of sense from that. There's SEC experience. There's NCAA tournament experience, even though there wasn't deep run experience. There's a lot of stuff for a third option at the 5 that makes sense. Now, what else helps here? This helps justify Chad Baker-Mazara because now you've got 3 true 5 types plus Trevor Brazile, who's a 4-5. Last year, you only had 3 total. I don't count Adu Thero in that number. He was a 3-4 tweener. He did spend a lot of time with the 4. He did have, versatile defender. But I think this gets you to 3 true bigs, and Brazile is a 3-point capable, big volume rebound capable, shot blocking capable, 4-5 combo. And now, because you've got guys like Kareem Artal, who's a 20-plus-year-old forward coming in, we've been going back and forth. Is he on the outside looking in? Is there enough there for him to help? But there are combinations where it makes sense that you could get some minutes out of him. Carter Knox at the small ball 4 with Baker-Mazara on the court when Trevor Brazile's not on the floor or when he's playing the 5. I think Ewan is so versatile as a ball handler and decision maker with the ball that it won't necessarily be clumsy with him on the court as a 4, along with a Pringle or even an Onyenso if you got him, or even Brazile. Because he's a really good passer. He's not a floor stretcher. But this is why I think Baker-Mazara makes so much sense, because if you're not locked, so Jameer Watkins, let's say you got him. He's also makes sense in a lot of ways. I just think he's going to require a lot more playing time and a lot more shots, and he doesn't necessarily help you improve from 3-point shooting, which is what Arkansas needs. Baker-Mazara absolutely does. Wouldn't necessarily require as big of a role. Probably would be even less NIL-wise than Watkins and Haggerty. But Baker-Mazara at 6'7" also gives you some length on that perimeter. And guess what? If Carter Knox doesn't come back and you had this guy added, you've already responded with a veteran SEC guy with Final Four experience who's going to give you all the things I just said. The same with Watkins. If you got Watkins, it's just not the same as Mazara, but in some of these points I bring up, getting someone like that makes sense too, because you're worried about, well, what happens if you get Knox back? How do you make it work? They figure that out. But if you don't get Knox back, getting one of these guys would make a lot more sense to me than even Haggerty. Even though Haggerty, if you look at it in a vacuum and say, that's a second-team All-American. He scores 22 points per game. Oh, by the way, 36% from 3. He is a low 3 volume guy. He plays a ton of minutes. He doesn't take that many. Percentage is okay. We would talk about the positive of that, I guess, and try to figure it out. But he's not going to impact defenses on how they approach him. They're going to sag off of him or not necessarily sag off of him, but they're not going to be cheating on him, and staying out on him if someone else has the ball. He's not going to create a ton of gravity for shooters, unless you make the point where he'll drive in and kick it out. He did average 3.7 assists per game. I just think if he's expecting to be the lead guy, and then the price tags are going to be higher probably than these other two, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, there are a lot of other names out there. There are guys that Calipari could go for. The portal's still open for a couple more days. There'll be some more names going. We just saw heavy hitter names go in. Who's to say there won't be more of that? And then there's, sort of depth pieces that you could round out this roster with 2 or 3 guys cheap on the NIL that would help you with floor spacing, or maybe another, not more than one depth piece on the front line, maybe a center like Onenso, and then another forward who's not going to command a big role. There's more than one way to do this, but if you're trying to add a splash guy, an A-list kind of guy, CBM makes the most sense because of all the stuff you're bringing back, getting in the high school part, and all the variables that I just gave. He just seems to fit the best. Now, there are the antics, the technical fouls, all that stuff, getting thrown out of games, taunting stuff. How would Calipari be with that? How would that, is that something that's a deal breaker at some point if he doesn't feel like, that's something to consider. I think all the positives far outweigh that stuff. And it's not like he didn't help. Look at the backcourt pieces around him. Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Pettiford. They had so many guys outside of Janai Broome in that backcourt. Even Chaney Johnson, who they brought off the bench as a 6-man, was kind of a tweener 3-4, but he was a guy that they spaced the floor with too, because he could shoot a little bit from 3. Baker-Mazara can fit with a lot of different guys and a lot of guys that are going to get shots up. Probably better than guys that need more shots to get there. It's not as efficient as him. Not saying Jameer Watkins wouldn't be a great ad, but that NCAA tournament experience, the SEC experience, all the stuff I said, it just, none of the other names have checked those boxes like Baker-Mazara. All right, 21 minutes in. I told you how I'd finish it. 1 and 2, Yagana Onenso, rim protector, your third guy. If you can get him, I don't know what his expectations are in the portal on that 5 spot, but because of Ewan's versatility, now you can mix and match stuff, and Baker-Mazara doesn't necessarily not make sense along with an Onenso. And I like maybe the idea that Artal will be someone that's not just going to be one of the others. That's a fringe 8 to 10 minutes a game guy if you need that much out of him, that you're not afraid to use him, whether it's foul trouble or a combination of that and injuries. But he's 6'8", 6'9", and he's a man. He's not a teenager coming in. He's been out, he's played, and that's not a great pro circuit, the one he was on in Lithuania, but it's grown men, and the international games also good, and so there are some elements he could bring to maybe help this team as a deep depth part where you don't have to run out and get some other heavy minutes guy at the 4 to help help Brazil piece together those minutes at the 4 spot. There's more than one way to do this, but I like the way that I'm looking at this, thinking it's a possibility. All right, let's jump into here real quick. Darius Acuff Jr., Malik Thomas, just transitioning real quick, finished up, at least I think they finished up their main All-Star circuit play on Friday night in the Jordan Brand Classic. It's always the third of the big 3. You've got the McDonald's All-American game, you've got the Nike Hoop Summit, and then it's bookended. It's closed out with the Jordan Brand Classic. Acuff, out of these 3 games, got his second consecutive 20-plus point game in the Jordan Brand Classic. Malik Thomas got his most extensive playing time. He didn't play in the Nike Hoop Summit. Acuff did, and he didn't get as much run in the McDonald's game as he got in the Jordan Brand Classic. In fact, both of those guys were in the starting lineup together, playing on the same team, the Jordan Brand Classic. But let's just run through it real quick, because I saw a lot of really good things from both of them. Acuff, 22 points. He chucked up 24 shots, made 10. I had him at 2 of 12 from 3. The official stats had him 2 for 11. But he also, was very efficient, 8 of 13 on 2-point field goals in this game. Did some other stuff out there, had a few steals, assists, a couple of rebounds. One of those games where you continue to see Acuff's ability to play with pace, shift gears, and then get to a little array of little drives, floaters, and finishing moves, getting closer to the basket. And so, that's something that throughout the All-Star season he has shown that he can do and is one of the best in the country at doing. I think he's the top point guard or lead guard in the country, not only because the rankings all say that he is, just from the eye test when I watch him. Now, the 3-point shooting was already a big question mark before these games. You say, well, you can't take a lot out of All-Star games. Well, the Nike Hoop Summit was not played like an All-Star game. It was done very well. Both teams had multiple days to work on their stuff, get their coaching. And they actually ran stuff. It wasn't a free for all. The Jordan Brand Classic, was more like that traditional All-Star game where there's not a whole lot of defense. There's some, but not a lot, and just a lot of race car up and down the court. But Acuff, when we look at him statistically now through all 3 games, 19.3 points, 4.3 assists, 2 steals, 1.7 rebounds, 16 of 25 from inside the arc. And that's, again, all those things I mentioned. He had some mid-range shots in there as well, but 64% from the field inside the arc. For a 6'2 guy, that ain't too shabby. 7 of 23 from 3 is concerning, 25.9%. Tracking him all year at IMG Academy, you'd look at him statistically, and he'd have 1 efficient game from 3, and then about 2 or 3 other games that weren't that efficient. So, he was probably hovering around 30% or such, maybe a clip below that during the IMG Academy. I don't think he shot particularly well from 3 in the July part of the Nike EYBL circuit. If I recall correctly, he shot much better in the spring portion of it. I have to go back and really drill down on it. But it's certainly inconsistent there. So that's the only glaring thing. I mean, he made 5 of his 6 free throw attempts in these 3 games, 83.3%. I really like seeing Malik Thomas in the Jordan Brand Classic, just seeing extended minutes from him, really getting to see him play. But 16 points, efficient. He's was 6 of 11 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3 in that game, 1 of 2 at the foul line. So he had 16 points, had some assists. They credited him with 4 assists, a couple of rebounds, had a couple of steals as well. He had a dunk where he took Carmelo Anthony, the new Hall of Fame, Naismith Hall of Famer's son, who's a big-time player, took him off the bounce. He's also heading to Syracuse, by the way. His dad's, he's a legacy. But took him off the bounce and just smashed on him, just put him in the rim. And you like to see that because Thomas is athletic. He's springy at 6'4". He's a high-energy guy compared to Nick Smith Jr., who, by the way, I interviewed yesterday here on the 501 and put that out on Twitter. You need to go check that out. He talked Calipari. He talked pro hogs like Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, and Khalil Ware, who wasn't a pro hog, but his teammate at North Little Rock High School, but former teammates, pro hogs. Had some good talking points to check that out. But the energy level of Nick Smith Jr. is what I compare, that alpha, high-energy guy on the court. And, you have highs and lows with some of that. But Malik Thomas, the three-point shooting just in these games, remember we said 8.4 threes per game at Overtime Elite, and that was 38%. Well, when you combine the McDonald's and Jordan Brand Classics, he was 4 of 8 combined from 3. It's a small sample size, but hey, that's better than the alternative, and it gives you a glimpse of his shooting prowess. He looked good on even on the misses. Acuff doesn't look all that great on a lot of his misses. And just going back to Acuff, and I meant to say this and I didn't put it down in my notes, so I know I'm jumping back and forth. So I'll go back to Acuff in a second and talk a little bit more about the 3-point shooting. On Thomas, he finished up these 2 events 50% on 2-point shots, 50% on 3-point shots, and 50% at the free throw line. He was 2 of 4. So he was consistent. But in the 2 games combined, he averaged McDonald's and Jordan Brand Classic. Thomas averaged 11 points, 3.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and 2 steals. So, that's the numbers from all-star games. It's just, I put that stuff together and tweeted it out. Thought that might be of interest. All right. So both of these guys, when I look at them, I see them as, I have not changed my mind one bit. They are being brought in to have significant roles. And I expect they will. I expect that they will. And I think Acuff's a day 1 starter. I think if we're projecting right now, he's not just a day 1 starter, but, he's going to have the most minutes unless something goes terribly wrong at the 1 spot. And DJ will get his share of that. There may be a path to get him to both split it and get evenly, but Acuff's going to be a starter, in my view, in day 1. Thomas, I think, may get some starting opportunities. I'm not sure he'll start the season that way, but he's going to have a major role whether he's playing off the bench or not. He just is. And we'll see what Arkansas does with a guy like a Chad Baker-Mazara, even a PJ Haggerty or Jameer Watkins. Again, those are the 3 big names right now out there. But one of those would probably impact whether or not Thomas is starting. And he may not start anyway if you want to start Acuff and DJ together and with a guy like Knox and Brazil and then Ewan. So, but either way, he's going to have a significant role. But when we go back to Acuff's three-point shooting, one thing I noticed, I mentioned he was 7 of 23. Most of his shots that he made from three were on either the left corner or just below the left break. So he seemed to be more comfortable in that corner and on the left break. And for a guy that plays on the ball a lot, there may not be a ton of opportunity for him taking corner shots. So he's going to have to get better. But as I remember just watching those three games, and I'm including the Nike Hoop Summit for him, most of it again was left corner or below that left break. So what does it mean? Well, they chart stuff like that. And so if you're just judging off those three games, that was the strength of his, what was really overall an anemic three-point shooting. And in a couple of those threes, he made off the bounce what looked like shots he's probably really been working on creating off the dribble. You'd like to see him on the simple stuff, catch and shoot or spot up, get more efficient there, because that's where players can really, that's where your efficiency is going to really be if you're ever going to be efficient, is the stuff where the ball's moving and you're catching the next pass, and there's no reason to dribble. You need to knock down that catch and shoot or that spot up off whatever. That's where he's going to have to get better. So I wanted to dive a little deeper on his three-point shooting and then explain what I see and what I think could help him improve. You'd love him to be better than the 30% that DJ's been in the first 2 years, but nothing I've seen so far statistically really makes me feel comfortable. It'll be much better than that. And you hope it's not worse than that. But if you could get him to, 34, 35% as a freshman, and you could get DJ up from his career 30% to, 33, 34. If that helps your three-point shooting, if you can get guys to improve, and you hope that those guys can identify that, work on it, and improve. All right, 31 minutes, 50 seconds in. That's my take. I was impressed with both Acuff and Thomas, and still feel the way I do about the importance of them coming in as freshmen. But you still like the retention. You still like veteran guys. That's how Calipari constructed the first roster, and I see him doing it again. And just to repeat, to wrap all that up with the incoming guys, I'm looking at Chad Baker-Mazara and Yagana Onenso is the two best ways to do it. In my opinion, there are multiple ways to do it. Calipari may see it differently, and there's other good ways to do it. I just focused on that today. Last bit of news before we get out of here. 2026 in-state prospect top 25. ESPN ranks him as the number 22 top player in the country. Jishan J.J. Andrews, 6'6", maybe pushing 6'7", strong, physical, just built right. Looks like an NBA body already at a Little Rock Christian Academy. We know that he's going to announce on May 15th. We know Arkansas was in his final five. Well, he chopped that down. He reminded us of his May 15th decision date, but he's lowered that list now to a final three. And he's eliminated Oklahoma and Marquette. So it leaves Arkansas, LSU, and Missouri, the last three standing. Remember, this is a guy that if he picks Arkansas, and I still believe Arkansas is the obvious team to beat here, I won't come out and make a 100% crystal ball prediction. I'm still trying to piece together stuff on, I don't know how much I'll get at specifics with NIL. And Arkansas is not bashful about NIL. But some of the promises that are running out there, I know LSU's really stepped up the NIL, but that in concert with playing time and role always makes me a little bit bashful. The way Calipari's doing things now, to just go ahead and say, oh, this is a no-brainer. But NIL aside, it is a no-brainer. He'd be a legacy. His dad, Sean Andrews, was a first-team All-American lineman at Arkansas back in the day, and All-Pro with the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL. It's his son. So there's that. There's John Calipari's better than everybody else's track record of getting guys to the next level. A lot of one and dones, and even the ones that aren't, he still helps them find ways to get drafted and flourish. And then he likes to play as freshmen, so it's not like he won't. It's not like he can't tell you you're going to have a role here. And if he doesn't recruit guys that he doesn't envision a role for without telling them that. If it's a smaller role, that'll all be delivered. So that's why I do keep an eye on some of the other promises that are out there. But if not for something like that to shock the system, this to me is a no-brainer. It's an easy path for Arkansas. Young man this year at Little Rock Christian Academy. Remember, as a sophomore, he was the 4A state MVP of this 4A state title game. And because he played a lot as a freshman and started back-to-back 4A state titles at Little Rock Christian, they moved up in classification this year, lost in the playoffs to Benton. who was the number one overall team in the state and ended up winning the 5A state championship. So 5A, but Andrews was on that team as well. But this season as a junior, over 30 points per game and over 10 rebounds per game. And, not the most skilled guy. He continues to work on that when you talk about shooting and ball handling and all that. But a tremendous slasher, plays with a physicality, tough defensively, and dives after 50-50 balls and just makes every play to win the play, not to bolster his numbers. I just love that about him. And he's a guy that's going to be in the running. ESPN Top 25. He's going to be in the running to earn one of those coveted McDonald's All-American selections. That usually happens mid to late January when those things get announced. But J.J. Andrews could be the first one off the board, class of 2026 to Arkansas. And again, the announcement's May 15th. But I think a lot of J.J. And the things I just described about him as a player, if it doesn't make you think of guys like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond III, even DJ Wagner, not as big and not a wing guy, but just that hard nose. Calipari doesn't always he doesn't always light up over shooting skill. There's a lot of that other stuff that he really likes. Guys that are fearless, play really hard, and take to coaching. And I think all of those things. And play the right way, not make it about themselves. And I think J.J. Andrews fits that. All right, 36 minutes. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Happy Easter once again. I've enjoyed this. We'll probably be back on tomorrow. I think business starts to pick up. We're going to start really trying to figure out who is Arkansas zeroing in on. I mentioned how I would do it with 2. There may be a path to finish with 3 more players. I tend to think it won't be more than 2 more, but we're going to keep an eye on everything and come back in here. Until next time, please hit subscribe, like, share, turn on the notifications. Thanks for being here. It's HogvilleNET YouTube Live, and I'm Kevin McPherson. See you soon.